Okay, so now we're going to talk about some potential court actions that may be brought against nurses in the course of nursing care. They're also, obviously, nurses are subject to all criminal law, but there are some specific things that may be connected to nursing care. So we're talking about criminal actions in this section, and then we'll move on to civil actions in the next recording. So criminal law applies to misdemeanors and felonies, or is divided into misdemeanors and felonies. Misdemeanors are considered minor crimes. Felonies are considered major crimes. What determines misdemeanor or felony is established by law, and it may vary by state, and there actually have been some changes in that in recent years. So criminal law carries potential penalties of both fines and imprisonment, and then a criminal record that will follow that person throughout life. So some potential criminal charges that nurses have faced or may face in the course of work are things like theft and misappropriation of property. There have been cases in long-term care and home health, probably in acute care as well. We really hear about these cases that happen in long-term care and in home health, in which nurses have stolen items or money from patients. So theft and misappropriation of property. But nurses can also be prosecuted for theft of property from an employer. So taking home supplies from work. Another potential criminal charge for nurses is a nursing practice violation, like scope of practice violation. I am licensed as an RN, so the things that are within the RN scope of practice I can do. If I diagnose an illness and write a prescription that's not within my scope of practice, that would be practicing medicine without a license. And so that would be a criminal act. Scope of practice violations may be misdemeanors or felonies. That's important for you as LPNs, because sometimes your jobs ask you to do things that are outside the legal scope of practice. And whether you're able to do that safely or not doesn't protect you if it's not within the LPN scope of practice. So make sure that you are not allowing yourself to be manipulated into potential trouble. Negligent homicide would be not a very common criminal charge, but if a nurse in the course of their duties is so negligent is clearly negligent, and that leads to the death of the patient, then they could be charged with negligent homicide. There have been some kind of controversial cases over that because there have been times that maybe an error was committed by one nurse, but there were some systemic contributors to that error. And so that's kind of been in the news a bit, whether those should be criminal charges against the nurse or civil liability for the facility, because the conditions of that job made that error more likely. But if a nurse is negligent and a patient dies as a result of that negligence, then they can be charged with negligent homicide. Violations of the Food and Drug Act are probably the most common criminal violations that nurses commit. And that's going to have to do with using illegal drugs, obtaining drugs illegally, or drug diversion. Okay, so this one was short because hopefully we don't have a lot of nurses committing criminal acts. We're going to come back and talk about civil law, and that's going to be a lengthier recording.